I'm filming this video the day after the hardest day in the year in the National Football League. It's the day after every team had to cut their roster down to just 53 players. Now they can bring 16 back onto a practice squad, but yesterday coaches had to inform players in very difficult conversations, players who've practiced, who've risked injury, who've invested so much time and energy pursuing their dream of being in the NFL, and then a coach has to have a very hard conversation with them and tell them, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen for you here. Most people don't relish hard conversations, and yet they're a really important part of life. And in Matthew chapter 16, we have a hard conversation, brief one, at least what we receive of it, between Peter and Jesus. If you look in verses 21 to 28 in Matthew 16, this is the first time that Jesus tells the disciples that, in fact, he's going to undergo great suffering in Jerusalem and he's going to be killed. And Peter takes Jesus aside and begins to rebuke him. It's a very strong term in Greek. It's like a parent reprimanding a child for doing something wrong or doing something really bad. And he says, God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you. And Jesus turns to Peter, and in our verse for the day, verse 23, Jesus says, but he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. I know many of us think of Jesus as being always loving and kind and everything else, and in some ways, Jesus looking at Peter, saying, get behind me, Satan, that doesn't sound like, that gentle, loving, peaceful Jesus that many of us envision. But there's a saying that being clear is being kind. And part of what Jesus is trying to do with Peter, and especially for all the other disciples as well, is to be clear that what Peter thinks Jesus should do and what God and Jesus think he should do are two very different things. And the difference is where Peter is setting his mind. And it's so important for us not to set our mind on human things, on what we think should happen, but to seek the mind of God, or to seek the mind of Christ, to set our mind on God and the kingdom of heaven and who God calls us to be, what God calls us to do, to always be focusing our mind on divine things. I hope you'll be able to do that today. I hope this brief little video helps you do that today. And I'm going to be preaching about it for a lot longer than 3 to 4 minutes. So I hope you'll join us in person or you'll tune in online.